Oh, and I'm going to have to make sure I...
Oh, it says live. Hello, anyone who's here.
It's live. Hello, anyone who's already here. We are live. Woo.
The early bird gets the worm, right?
Yes.
If you want a worm. I'm not an early bird.
So I can see people in the chat. Hello, everyone in the chat. Hello, everyone who can now see us live, listening to me verbal processing my thoughts as I attempt to multitask this situation. Welcome to this Meet the Speaker event. We do have multiple speakers planned to come along today. At the moment, we have the lovely Annie.
Hello.
Where should I start? How about I give a really brief intro to the whole thing, and then
that sounds good.
We talk about speakers, and then we talk about questions. So you may have seen the Autism from the Inside Online Summit this week. It's still going on live right now. We're just coming to the end of day 4. So there's a whole another day of speakers coming up today. And then we also have an Encore Weekend, which means that all day Saturday and Sunday you can watch any of the speaker sessions from throughout the week, all weekend on demand. So that's really exciting. We've had so much great feedback on that so far. Maybe you saw Annie's contribution to that on self-care earlier this week, which was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
So
I'm trying to multitask too.
Let me very briefly introduce Annie for anyone who hasn't met her yet. Annie is an autistic and ADHD human rights lawyer, disability and mental health advocate, and is the founder and lead consultant of Neuro Access, a consultancy specializing in equity and accessibility for neurodivergent people. So great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. I always love your summits.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to do a bit more of an interactive thing. I mean, one of the best parts about pre-recording the sessions is that they're accessible for anyone in any time zone, anywhere in the world, and you don't need to come in live, but it's fantastic to see over 100 of you on the chat at the moment watching us. And something that is very new today that I don't know very much about, I've turned on super chats. I don't know very much about,
fancy.
But if you do, feel free to use that option in YouTube today.
My tech coach uses them. For some reason, I think because his audience are tech focused, they're all into it. Moose. Sorry, that's my dog.
I believe what that can do, it's like a donation or something, and I believe what it can do is it highlights your comment in a really fun way, and you can have special stickers and things. And if you're asking a question, it means your question comes to the top and things like that. Oh, hello, Annie's dog. What's your dog's name?
That's Moose.
Hi, Moose.
I'll try to get him higher. Come on, up. Say hello. He wants a treat.
I think your popularity just got down a peg, Annie. Your Moose is probably stealing the show right now.
That's okay. I will give it up for Moose any day. He's beautiful.
So we also have planned joining us, Sandhya. Oh, we have a super chat sticker.
Oh my goodness!
Wow, so how exciting is that? That is. I just want to mention this. That is the very first super chat this channel has ever received ever. So thank you, Ikate. Oh man, I really should have thought about this, because now when I try and pronounce people's usernames,
I know usernames.
I'm going to absolutely mess it up every time. But congratulations.
Feel free to give us the phonics. I'm terrible at phonics.
First person's username I've horribly mispronounced on this channel.
Oh.
And it won't be the last.
That's amazing. Oh, that's so hard. I like hearing other people pronounce their names, and then I just mimic it. But I hate having to guess by reading.
I'm very, very good at, number one, losing my train of thought, which we are
Oh.
both fantastic at. So I will get
We
back
are
to introducing
excellent
the
at
other
that.
speakers in a second.
Yep.
But yeah, if someone says their name to me or says any phrase in another language as well, I'm really, really good at mimicking
Yeah, same.
it.
Yeah.
But
Maybe it's
that
all our
short-term
echolalia practice. Oh, lit Kate. Oh, someone's guessing. Okay, maybe. We've got a question, Paul, or do you want to start with your questions you got beforehand?
What I'm attempting to do
Okay.
is,
Oh, have we done the introduction? I'm distracting you. I'm so sorry.
I'm attempting to finish the introduction of
You go.
making an apology on behalf of Pete Wharmby, who will probably not be joining us. He has to look after his daughter tonight, who's not feeling well. And Sandhya is still coming to the panel, but she has parent duties as well this morning that she has to take care of.
Be here a little later if you stay with us.
And we're hoping Jeremy will still join us too. Oh, and Mike, we have a super chat from Mike as well. Hi, Mike.
Look at that. Awesome.
Okay, let's get stuck straight into a question.
Yeah.
Quite a challenging one, actually. This is from Catherine from our Patreon community. What do your friendships look like?
Oh.
And what role does masking play when you spend time with friends?
That is a great question. Do you want me to answer first?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
had the limelight for too long, so
yeah, that's okay. I'm just excited. I'm like, oh, I gotta talk. Yeah. So obviously, I think all friendships look different, and we all have different kinds of friends that fulfill different needs for us. But over my lifetime, which is only 32 years, but I've obviously had lots of different friends. But I actually, the ones that stick around are the ones that are slowly all turning out to be neurodivergent, or like already were, but are getting diagnosed. So I feel like we do attract our own kind. And that's quite interesting. I just went to my oldest friend's wedding last weekend from, I think we met in grade 5. Yeah, grade 5. And she recently got diagnosed with dyslexia and is now looking into ADHD. Yeah. So anyway, that's probably not answering the question. So I think for me, I think one of the reasons that most of my friends tend to end up being neurodivergent people, long-term ones anyway, is just because I can unmask more around them, and they're the ones that I feel are the most authentic and the ones that have stuck by my side even when I've dropped off the face of the earth for a year, which happens all the time. I've never been a person that can have a friendship where I continually check in and see people. I've not really ever understood that. And I used to feel quite a bit of shame about it because I saw some of my other friends keeping their relationships much more connected and thinking like I'm failing. Obviously, this was in my early 20s before I figured all this stuff out. But now I'm like, oh, that's why. I just didn't have the spoons for that. And that's not, I don't like having to do small talk, and I don't really find good connection in keeping up with what's going on in other people's lives. And I did definitely feel shame about that for a while. But now, I do love hearing about what's happening in my friends' lives. I just don't want to keep up on a daily basis. Like, give me an update every 6 months and like always reach out if you need me, right? But anyway, so for me, it's really about like shared interests and just completely feeling safe with them. The minute I start feeling unsafe with a friend, which is usually when I'm getting judgment from them about how I'm not showing up or how I'm not interested in maybe their work or something, then I'm sort of like, I start to slowly back away and avoid them. Anyway, what about you, Paul?
Yeah, and something that we can forget sometimes is that good friends can help us to unmask.
Yes, that's so true. They bring out that safe feeling of authenticity that we just slowly can feel like we're less putting up that barrier, which is awesome. Such a good point.
Yeah, because it's one thing sort of doing stuff by yourself, but there can be a bit of shame around that. Like you said, it's like, so well, much. I know this is the way that I work, but I still have this sense that there's something inherently wrong with that, and I should be doing
the
it
golden should.
Whereas
should.
if I am unmasking in front of another person and they're like, yeah, cool, this is fine, what's the problem? There's no problem. Then that is just really deeply psychologically really validating in that
so validating
sense, and it makes it easier to then both unmask to other people in different relationships, but also to feel better about my own needs to do that for myself.
Yes.
So,
Someone put question mark spoons. If anyone doesn't know spoon theory, you can Google it, but it's essentially from the chronic illness space of everyone has a certain amount of energy a day or spoons, and people with disability or neurodivergent or chronic illness tend to have less spoons, so they're precious, and every day our spoon count fluctuates. So I said to Paul when we logged in today, I'm having a low spoon day, which means I don't have a lot of energy to give. And anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I sign my emails with many spoons, and I always get responses mostly from corporate people going, what's many spoons mean?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Love spoon theory.
Well, something exciting that I can say at the moment is welcome to Sandhya. Hello, Sandhya.
Hi. Oh, I'm glad
I don't know if you could hear our conversation before, Sandhya, but we were talking about how
friendships,
friends, like really good friends, can actually help you with unmasking, and
make you feel safe.
Question about spoons. Do you relate to spoon theory?
Spoon theory, yeah.
Absolutely. So much. I think hearing about spoon theory just changed everything and made me stop pushing so hard. And spoon theory was the one theory that actually made me stop and not conform to neuronormative expectations to, do after school activities all the time, and just kind of recognize actually we're pretty low on spoons, and that's the reason for refusal.
And that's enough.
Just change our life and have really low stimulation to preserve spoons.
So affirming. I actually learnt about it years before I was diagnosed autistic ADHD, when I was in the chronic illness world. And that's just followed me through. And I'm like, it's one of the best ways to articulate where we're at, rather than saying like I'm exhausted or, whatever. It's just, I have low spoons, which could be for so many different reasons, but you're just seeing where I'm at,
Yeah,
because if you say something like I'm tired, they're like, oh, you must have just done something really exhausting. What did you just do that was really exhausting? It's like, no, I
existed in a neurotypical world.
Yeah.
So exhausting.
Really interestingly, I just did this chart for my kid.
Oh, I love that.
After school, it's, just take your lunchbox out so it doesn't go rotten. Have a snack. And then after that, it's let's do some battery charging work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love that.
It's so much fun.
I saw a post this morning that was on self-care, and it was called Boring Self-Care. And it was like everything that Paul and I talked about. Well, it was some of the stuff we talked about in my session on self-care. I'm like, no, this is like neurodivergent, disabled, chronic illness self-care. This is like the real shit, not go do some meditation and yoga. Just eat regularly.
Yeah.
It's quite hard for some of us.
Can I get really excited about something kind of left the field? Related.
Yeah.
So my next book is actually about kind of spoon theory and energy accounting.
Look, we just totally set that up. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've just gone totally rogue with it though. Because it's something that means so much. I'm like, I want to have some fun. And what I'm going to do is put some little gremlins coming and like draining your body battery.
So important.
I love the idea of like little gremlins. So they call drainer gremlins, and they come and like just unplug you, and like if there's a change, your charge goes down.
Yes. Well, I think also because and the gremlins can be invisible, right? Because so many people, the minute you say you're exhausted, they want to hear this story about why, like what's going on in your life. It must be something that's really exhausting you. I'm like, no, it's actually just really exhausting on a daily basis to exist in this world with my nervous system.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of like the gremlins are real, and just because you can't see them and they're not an obvious thing, doesn't mean they're not legit. and valid. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And I also just love gremlins in general. I'm like, I'm going to put it in.
Totally. It won't let me post the website, but the blog from the original Spoon Theory is called but you don't look sick.com. So if you write in Spoon Theory with Christine, is it Miserandino? Not terrible at pronunciation. But you don't look sick.
Maybe.
Yeah. Sounds about right. Anyway.
I've mispronounced enough things today already, so I'll leave that one to you.
You're not alone.
And also, it was Kate before on the super chat. It was cool. Lit Kate. And I believe, if I'm not crossing my wires, Kate is one of the moderators of our online social group. So thanks so much for everything that you do, Kate, and your super chat as well. We have another interesting question. So feel free to put questions for us in the chat as well. But we have a couple of questions that were already submitted by some in our Patreon community. And especially now that Sandhya's here, I'd like to ask this question. I'll just read it out. This is a question for any autistic parents. Sorry, guys. Yes. My two kids are autistic and ADHD, and we understand that stimming is good and should always be allowed, is what the question said. However, my 9-year-old boy has a lot of vocal stims, and my 6-year-old girl has a sound sensitivity, so his stimming often overstimulates her. There's a little more to the question, but I think you get the concept. Like, how can we manage that type of stuff?
Yeah. Sorry, I just saw Moose wants to answer the question. He's barking. Yeah, he does. Do you want to go first?
Maybe, yeah, I'll ask Sandhya first, maybe.
Yeah. So I think to be neuroaffirming is to recognize everybody in that space. So it's not just, one person gets their needs met. It's everybody. We're going to find a way for everyone to get their needs met. So in that scenario, it might be who has more spoons to adapt at this point. And the person with the more energy will use the accommodation and change to meet their needs.
Yeah, there's a bit of a if you take these things to any extreme, they become a problem. So this statement, stimming is good, stimming should always be allowed. Well, it can also be a problem sometimes. So especially, I deal mostly with adults rather than children. And the question is most of the time, am I empowered with a choice in this situation? So sometimes I will choose not to stim for a short amount of time, and having the ability to regulate that is actually a really good thing to practice. Now, most of the time I'm going to not want to regulate, to suppress that, because it takes too much energy. And we were talking about the spoons before. But actually practicing regulating that is a skill that is worth learning.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's such a real thing. We have so many neurodivergent families are just that. They're full of neurodivergent people, and often we have conflicting needs, especially from a sensory perspective. I'm extremely hypersensitive to noise, and my partner loves coming home from work and being quite noisy, not even that noisy, like puts his headphones on, does some gaming, but even being in the same room with the headphones on and hearing sometimes like shooter noises or construction noises if he's building a city grates at me. Yeah. And I think a lot of the time, I only have one son, so I don't have the conflicting kids, stimming needs and stuff. But for me, if we're ever around his cousins or anything, I'll sort of try and separate them. Like, if it's possible to control the environment. So like if one of them needs to be noisy, let them be in the noisy space, whether that's out the back or in the lounge. And then if the other one needs quiet time, maybe, and this isn't like for everything, right? But this is like occasional helping in a really tight pinch. They can go into their bedroom or your room and read a book or have some time with their headphones on, or even in the same space with their noise cancelling headphones, if that helps. But yeah, for me, it's always about the environment.
I just found a really fun button. We just got a nice message from Mike, and I can put it on the screen. How fun is that?
There you go.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, that's lovely.
So good.
In addition to what you're saying, Annie, one of the messages that I got as a kid is that it was always my job to suppress my needs for someone else. And when you have two kids, it is fairly natural that one is going to have more needs than the other. And it's going to be most of the time, look, I'm really sorry, but you're the one with more spoons at the moment. Can you please do this for the other one? And so I just wanted to flag that it's really important to also have the counter message of your needs are equally valid as your brother in this instance, for example. But
such a good point.
In this particular situation, we are going to try and do this. And we definitely want to turn the tables and flip it so that you feel like, you know, your needs are just as important.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely.
Okay. Let's have a quick look at the comments. So if you have a specific question for us, let us know in the comments. There's also the super chat option, which I've just enabled today. We also have another interesting question from Heather from our Patreon community in advance. A bit of a curly one, but given that we're all on a continual journey of discovery, how do you know what information to share and what is still sort of processing behind the scenes before you share it? Like, yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah. Still figuring it out.
Yeah. And I think, you know, honestly, sometimes it's still processing, and we share it that we're still processing Absolutely. At that point. And I think it's okay to say, hey, look, I don't know exactly, you know, the research or what this is, but this is what I'm experiencing, and having our community support us in that way too. Just go, oh yes, I experience it. And I think sometimes, you know, when we connect with community together, we work that stuff out.
Yeah. And also I think, I don't know about you guys, but in the early days, I remember like everything I came across, I needed to understand what the label was or how to explain it or what mechanisms were behind it. And as much as that helped to an extent, because I love learning about everything, but sometimes things come up and I have this craving to want to really unpack them. And it's not always the answer. So I guess in saying that, I'm saying basically like you don't always have to learn all about everything, or, you know, if you have an experience, you don't have to be like, oh, that's autism or that's ADHD or that's my chronic illness or whatever. Sometimes it's okay to just, I think, I don't know about other people, but for me, it was almost like a protective mechanism of, if I can learn everything about this, then I can better advocate for it. But what I've learned in practice and with my clients is that it's in the moment. A lot of the time it's not actually that helpful to be like, oh, I'm having this problem and this is why it's happening. Most people don't really care about the why, or if they do, if it's like an employer, they'll want like a doctor's letter, right? They're not going to listen to you even if you're probably better educated than the doctor, let's face it. But it's more about you feeling like the need to justify. But I guess my point in this is like, you don't need to justify your lived experience. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're experiencing, it's valid, regardless of if it has a label or a very medical explanation.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure if this is exactly what you were saying, Sandhya, but I often do that when I know that I haven't quite formed an idea yet. I'll just tell people that I'm still processing it and I'm still sort of okay, this is like the start of an idea, and let me talk it out with you. And I just tell them that this is what is happening, which can be really helpful. But similarly, there have been lots of times when I've felt really grateful that I did not share an idea publicly too early. And then a week later, I'm like, oh, I have a completely different take on this now. I'm really glad I didn't share that first very, very, very raw take. So I guess it also depends on who you're sharing it with. If it's someone you trust, who can more easily hear all of your mistakes, then that's really good. If it's more of like a professional advocacy sense, then a little bit of patience with that is good. I know if I feel really strongly about something, I will usually think twice before saying anything publicly, just because there's so much that's just emotion, and it's very difficult to pull out the real message behind a stranger on the internet's emotional outburst. Yeah. So that kind of emotional stuff is best shared in a personal relationship.
A safe space, yeah.
I don't know if that has anything to do with the question.
Yeah, I was answering. I'm like, would I just go completely away from the question?
Yeah, I think I tend to ask myself, like, when I am feeling emotional, is this emotion helpful to share? Like sometimes, there are things that happen that are wrong, and I know that they're wrong, and I am emotional. And I think, sometimes this is how we operate, through high emotion. And it's so making sure that we're checking, is this emotion, when I share it, is it going to be helpful for people or harmful to people to kind of witness? And if it is harmful, then that's a private thing. But if it's helpful for us to share that, and making sure that we construct it that way, then, it could be helpful for people to kind of see other people experiencing emotion too. So I think there is that balance of, who do I share it with and why, making sure that's really important. I can't remember the original question, but we're just going on.
There's a lot of value in that, Sandhya. I think I'm a big Brene Brown fan. Some of you probably know her work, but I do have a bit of a problem with some of it, because it's coming from this. I feel like it's coming from this perspective, and I'm coming from the complete opposite perspective. So
yeah,
most of the population need encouragement to be vulnerable and to share things. And I find a lot of the autistic population are coming from the other side. We want to share absolutely everything, and we need to temper that a little bit and say, well, is this actually appropriate in the situation? However, what that means is I personally have found that because I tend to always be the one to share first, it is really valuable to help other people come into that actually emotional connecting space.
That's so true. I get emails quite a bit from, Neurokin, and they're always like essays of like their life story, and they, emotionally, I have to be in a headspace. So like put them to the side until I'm in the right space to read them. And at the end, they're always like profusely apologizing about how it's like turned into an epic email, and like they've overshared and all this stuff. And whenever I actually get a chance to respond, I'm always like, you don't have to apologize. Like, because I get it. I've been that person, and I'm very sensitive, both to noise and that, but also emotionally. And I've always been the oversharer that's gotten in trouble because I've shared too much and it's not been appropriate and all that rubbish. And obviously I realize that boundaries are also important, which I'm still always learning. My psychologist said once, I think we might have mentioned this in your session, Paul, but you don't know what your boundaries are till they've been crossed. And that helps me a lot, because I always felt so shameful when things would go wrong, and I'd be like, oh, I should have like set a boundary, or I should have been more like clear on what my needs were or what I wasn't happy with. But you can't really know it until it happens. So don't beat yourself up, essentially.
Yeah. And I think though that comment about boundaries is probably the crucial comment in here, because
so true.
When I am sharing something that's vulnerable, even people who follow me, they've learned to say, can I DM you? And I go, no. Please do not DM me your story because I cannot take that on. But it's something that we learn to kind of set with each other about boundaries and the emotional labor that comes from just kind of having these kind of comments and stories all the time.
It's
and
full on.
We have the capacity to take that on in a free time.
Yeah, a lot of the time I'll just ignore them if it's too emotionally triggering.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard from me, it's either because I've lost your email or it was a bit too much at the time, but not because you're too much, but because my shit's too much to go there. Like, it's not about them, right?
Yeah, and that's where something like spoons comes in. It's like, it's not to do with you. Like, I'd really love to help.
I wish I had the spare spoons.
I just do not have that. And something I always remind people in my emotional intelligence training is that dealing with other human beings is probably the most complex task we could possibly endeavor to do in our lifetime. So the fact that it's hard, the fact that something like personal boundaries is a bit challenging is because it is seriously challenging, and a lot of the population haven't practiced doing that. So
true.
We have had a couple of questions that in the chat that I've highlighted that we could go through. So just very, very, very briefly, some people are asking about the other speakers who were planned to join us today. Unfortunately, we've had an apology from Pete, who has had to look after his daughter, who's a little bit unwell this evening. I'm not sure if Jeremy is still going to be able to join us. Haven't heard from him yet, but hopefully he can still make it. And let's take this question. I'm going to put it on the screen to see if we can figure out what it means together, because sometimes when I read questions, I don't always get it. Have you ever struggled taking classes of any kind? I suffered on my university degree course because I got my degree with an extra year and lots of damage.
This is such a good
struggled with classes?
I don't want to keep being the first one to answer because I'm so excited. I want to jump in. So I'll temper myself.
Do you want to go first, Paul?
I do. Yeah. Paul, you go first.
Okay. So short answer, no. But
so jealous.
It depends. When I've always found most academic stuff pretty easy, but only when I get to control everything. So ironically, I found university so much easier than high school, because in high school you had to work to your teacher's schedule and they wanted you to work in a certain way, and they were helping you by teaching you study skills, which may work for some people, but absolutely did not work for me at all. And so I needed to do things by myself, which included ignoring mainstream advice 90% of the time. So in the situations where I could do that, I would usually do fairly well. And I also picked subjects that I could do very well. So they included things that had a very clear structured answer, like engineering. And I did significantly less well in anything that required you to read between the lines and be creative and figure out what the task is, because it's not just
unspoken rules. Totally.
Yeah. I think the idea of structure and being able to choose what you are into is huge. I failed through high school. I was very honest about that until I got taught ADHD specific study skills about how to make things colourful and interesting for yourself, which is why my office looks like that. How to organise your environment for maximum input so that you can actually concentrate. Through university, I think getting to university was really exciting for me because I knew I wanted to be a psychologist since I was like 11 years old, right? Studying people was my favourite. There were, because you start off with like a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. There were subjects that I just couldn't get through, and it was really, really hard. I know when I did neuroscience, because that was more sciencey, I was like, we're not studying people, we're studying the brain, and this is boring. And you're talking to me about electrons. I struggled. And I actually thought I had narcolepsy because I just fell asleep. Like 5 minutes into the lecture, I'm like, I need to get this information. And connecting to the why really helped me, and being really strict with why this was important and how I could study. So often I didn't actually extract information from the lecture. I had to record the lecture, go back and do it my own way. It was a lot more work.
So much. Yeah, I relate to both of your stories so much. I actually did what was called the Suicide Six in high school, which is all maths and sciences, and I was dead set on being a doctor. Thank you, Grey's Anatomy. And the reason maths was always my strongest subject. I was like, numbers and patterns have always been my thing, and I did terribly at English. It was always my worst subject. Similarly to Paul, it was the unspoken rules, and that because there wasn't a right or wrong. Like, maths was so like straightforward. You're either right or you're wrong. There's no, subjective interpretation rubbish. But then in year 11 and 12, randomly started getting A's in English. I think the teacher just liked me. Like, genuinely, I think the teacher just liked me, which just proves my point about how subjective that shit is. Because I didn't phenomenally get better at English, I'm telling you. I'm also dyslexic, and that's a whole thing. But anyway, so that's when I started thinking, I just opened my mind to options outside of the maths and sciences a bit. And my favorite thing in high school, my two passions were, well, my main things that I did was I was debating school captain. I've always loved arguing. My dad and I constantly quote A Few Good Men. I also like movies, as you can tell. I just am so passionate about helping vulnerable people. And that's been probably my special interest through all of my studies and career and what I still do. But uni was really hard. I breezed through school, where I was very lucky to, like, I just didn't have to study. And then it really caught up to me in university. And I remember I switched from doing all maths and sciences in high school to doing law and commerce at uni at 17 years old. And it was just such a shock to my system and how different they were. And I remember in my second half of my first year of commerce, I had to do business stats, and it was my only subject in my whole 5-year double degree that was maths based. And I was like, I'm going to breeze this. Like, I can do maths in my sleep. And I failed. Only subject I've ever failed in my life, purely because I just did not do anything and thought I would breeze through it. But it was one of those subjects that you had to kind of keep up with. And then later in my degree, I applied to Oxford to do human rights law on exchange. And I almost didn't get to go because of that fail. And I had to write an essay to Oxford and explain the fail. I ended up, luckily, I had to repeat it. Oh, sorry, that's my camera. One second. I had to repeat the subject because it was a core commerce subject. And I topped the class because I was so pissed off about failing. Anyway, so hopefully I come back. There we go. Yeah, so anyway, I did go to Oxford, and that was the hardest thing I've ever done, and probably the only time in my life that I've truly applied myself to study. But by 5th year of my law degree, I did not even go to uni except to show up for exams. Luckily, most lectures and stuff were online, and for classes that had mandatory participation, I just took the hit to my grades because I didn't want to show up and have to talk in class. And very ADHD, wouldn't study consistently, crammed at the last minute, did all my assignments within 24 hours before, felt like the massive imposter by the time I got my degree and started being like in legal practice. I was like, what am I even doing here? I don't know anything. And I kept, every time I got through my uni, like I'd be like, every next exam I'd be freaking out. I'm going to fail. And my partner would be like, oh no, but like you get straight distinctions, like you'll be fine. And I'd be like, no, this time it's going to happen. This time is the time people are going to realize I'm trash at this study. But the thing that sort of caught me up eventually, and I figured out slowly, was if I'm really interested in a subject, I can kill it. But that's pretty rare. So I don't know why my camera keeps dying. Anyway, I'll finish up. But essentially, nowadays, I'm still obsessed with studying, but I just refuse to do it at any traditional university. So I just, whatever I'm interested in at the time, I'll just get into it. But yeah, it looks like my camera's not going to come back. Sorry, guys.
Oh, okay.
Maybe just give it a minute. I'll just be verbal for a while.
Okay.
Anyway. Sorry, that was just like a rant.
The main thing that I'm taking from these answers is basically when we're set up well, we can do really well.
Yeah.
And when we're not, well, obviously we have different results.
Yeah.
And that's actually a big part of my story as well, because I did not realize how well I was set up until I didn't have those supports anymore. So it's not just that I was picked subjects that I was good at. I also had a lot of support from my family. I had an incredibly good friendship, social network that really worked for me during those years. They were probably the most social years of my life, and it kind of just everything worked. And I think when you take away even one of those pillars, like if I didn't have such a supportive social network, what are the chances that I could still have the energy to push myself through 5 years of an engineering degree? Like suddenly that is a lot harder if you don't have those other things in place at the same time.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Based on that question, let's have another question. Support groups are hard to find. Any suggestions for either finding one or putting one together? So thanks for that question, James. Let me answer that very briefly, and then I'm curious to hear the other responses. So we've set up an in-person support group. Well, actually, we deliberately don't call it a support group. We started calling it a social group, and now it's kind of morphed into, it's not just social, it's for the it is for anyone actively exploring their own neurodiversity. So it's fairly social, and it's not so much about support, it's more about connecting with other people in that way. And that was relatively simple. I won't say easy, relatively simple to set up. Basically, we needed two things. We needed a venue and someone to commit to going every week so that there'd be at least one person there. And then after that, we were getting sort of 5 to 10 people from day one. And now it's a fortnightly event that we have probably 20 or 30 people every session. So they can be relatively simple to set up if that's something you're interested in. Otherwise, we also have the online social group that runs Zoom things. But usually my advice with this is just try and connect with people in your local area, because they are going to have the most knowledge about if there is anything actually happening in your local area.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Sandhya?
I always think the local area is the easiest, because if I have to travel to see someone, that makes it a lot harder to maintain. But that being said, my support group does live really far away from me. And what we do is just have support online, and that is how we kind of maintain our connection. So we only actually see each other maybe twice a year. In which case we're happy to travel. But in terms of finding one, perhaps like asking if your child is part of a school, seeing if they've got like a support group for parents. You can contact your peak bodies. So, in Australia, I don't know where you're from, but we have a maze to say, what support groups do you know exist? There is also this website, meetup.com, and often you'll find groups already organised there as well. So there are a few different avenues that you can go and explore. But sometimes, it just starts with, hey, I'm doing this thing. If anyone wants to join me, please just privately message me. And it might start with 2, and then it grows from there.
Yeah, you can totally do your own. That'd be awesome. We need more. I agree with everything you guys have said. I think so this is funny. I set up a local support group. I have a few Facebook pages that I run, and one of them is for autistic ADHD mums and parents, or AFAB, everyone's welcome. And we wanted to do a local get together, and we ended up doing it once a month. And every single month would come around and something would come up. To be fair, this was the year of starting daycare and getting out every sickness under the sun. So most of it was legit, but I don't know why I kept wanting to avoid it so much, because I really loved these people and I spoke to them online and they were totally my people, right? But I have kind of a pattern of doing that with anything in person. I don't really like meeting with people that are more than maybe 2 or 3 or 4 max, because I just find it so overwhelming and hard to concentrate on more than 1 or 2 conversations. So most of my own friendships support stuff is online, little groups online, and a lot of the stuff that I do happen very organically. I think it's totally helpful to have people to reach out to, or Meetup and Amaze, great suggestions. Also, most influencers, or whatever you want to call them, a lot of us have programs and groups or Patreons and meetups, and you can go to that sort of thing, even if it's just to connect with like-minded people who are going through similar stuff. And then through messaging some people that you meet through there, you can then organically maybe start meeting up with them. But I think really it's about learning what works for you, and not sort of letting expectations sort of make you feel bad about that or anything. I just kind of accept now that I pretty much will only do online social stuff if it's ever. I do the in-person stuff, but very rarely, and I have to give myself a few days off afterwards to recover. But yeah, I hope that helps.
Yep. Fun fact for anyone listening, Annie and I actually met that way.
Yeah.
We connected online. I just was commenting back and forth on her social media page, and when I went to Canberra, I was like, Annie, I'm in Canberra.
It was so fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was awesome. What's that? Yeah, cool.
So thanks so much for the question, James. Really, really good one. Oops, hang on. Let me click the right thing. We also had a follow-up question. If I can click the right button.
Oh, can I just add, I saw a comment before we do this next question. Is it normal to be oversensitive to micro expressions that people give in social settings? Is that part of underlying social stress? Actually, one of the things that I saw complained about most in COVID was people saying that they missed those things online, and how they didn't like doing the online meetings because they missed the little nuances. And for me, those nuances are so overwhelming, and I interpret everything. I'm so sensitive to slight expressions. They say autistic people can't read facial expressions. That's bullshit. I'm so sensitive to those things, to the point where sometimes I might read into them too much, maybe, but it's exhausting, and I can't switch that part of my brain off. So that's absolutely a legitimate stress to seeing people in real life. And I have much less of that online, which I like. Anyway, so I had to just answer that.
That's right. That is, I don't know if you noticed, that is exactly the question I was going to bring up for us to answer.
Oh, no way. I didn't see it. I was reading the comments. There you go, like mine.
And
the
question. Opposite is sometimes true as well.
So true.
You need that.
That's also totally fine.
I don't know if that's the case for me necessarily. If I do need it, I'm a very, very auditory person, so I'm completely happy on a phone call. I much prefer a phone call than a Zoom call, because then I don't have to look at anything or anyone.
Whereas I prefer video, because I do a lot of lip reading. And I find just relying on audio it's really draining for me. I get really anxious.
Yeah, so I hear that a lot from people as well. And also that you do get some facial expressions and you get some body posture through the visual call, which is enough to give you a bit more context.
But it's dulled, thank God.
But what I found is there's a lot of different types of in-person social interaction. And the biggest factor was how relaxed could I be in the situation. So I was at a really fun meetup the other day, but it was in a very noisy bar/restaurant with live music. And it was so fun that I wanted to stay there and have the conversations and I was really engaged. But I lost my voice. And then the next day I had a migraine and all of that kind of thing. I'm like, I really can't do that very often. Whereas if it's more like outside at a park with a few people and I don't feel the social pressure to do anything in particular, then that is actually super recharging for me. If it's in the right way, and if it's not in the right way, it's really draining. So I get this a lot with my coaching as well. I say, well, what's a good situation where you've had success in the past? And there's usually, I really love this event, but not always. And what we identify is that sometimes it's the right conditions and it's really great. And then sometimes there's just too much social pressure, or it's too noisy, or you've been asked too many questions, or you don't want to be verbal and people keep trying to talk to you. So it really depends on the situation.
So true.
I think, coming back to that question about being oversensitive to micro expressions, it comes back to autistic neurology and how we are detail oriented. So a lot of the times, like the kids get in trouble because they perceive someone as being mean to them. And yes, that person did, eye roll that everyone else missed.
Yeah, and then we get gassed for picking up on it.
That's right. We're picking up on those micro expressions that everyone else doesn't. And that's just part of our processing. I know generally in-person interactions, I focus on how someone's mouth is moving. So if I'm focusing on like that space, I'm much more likely to pick up any kind of detail and any kind of nuance in that kind of space. Yes.
I think that's also why I like lip reading, because it's like something to distract my brain from processing all the other information. Yeah. And I actually, in saying that, I remember when we met in person, when you came to visit, I was a little bit nervous because like our whole relationship had been text, right? And it was so good because I find when you meet neurokin, like who are, unmasked and everything, or even people that just get you don't have to make so much eye contact. Like half the time I remember you and I just like watching the kids play at the playground or staring off into the distance, but still talking to each other. And it was so great. And I love doing that. I love in real life with friends that I can just really not care about that stuff and think, they get judging me because I'm not paying attention in a neuronormative way,
Yeah.
Yeah. So good.
And there are some ways around that with, like I like to schedule a walk with someone, and when you're walking with them, you don't have the eye contact and things like that. There's also a really interesting social dynamic that you're supposed to respond to what the other person is making public. So if they're smiling at you, the correct answer is they're happy. But you're like, no, but they're obviously sad. Look at their eyes. They're dying inside. Like, no. They're obviously happy. So do not respond to their inner despair, please. They're trying to mask that. You're not supposed to see that or notice that, please.
Yeah. And equally, like those of us who have like flat affect, one of the things I struggle with online is I can see my reflection. So I'll pick up when I'm going flat, and I'm much more prone to masking because I'm just like, if I see it, I do it. Whereas in real life, people can think I'm, oh, there goes my damn camera. Anyway, people think that
by your camera. Yep.
Yeah, my camera's like, I don't want to see your flat affect, Annie. It's a low spoon camera all around. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying. But yeah, that's another thing. Flat affect is I used to be really anxious about that, and these days I care way less, which is great. We should all give less Fs, you know.
Okay, Ms. T, when I'm conversations with people, I can't get my words out unless I script beforehand. Does anyone else? Me and reading is not always great, but that's why I can post the comment and then other people can read it and understand it. I think we get the question.
Yeah, definitely.
About scripting. I answered the last one first.
I can go, but I forgot what the question is now. Where is it? Scripting.
Trying to get your words out without a script.
I think it depends who I'm talking to. If it's a new conversation, scripts can help just kind of ease the anxiety beforehand. Whereas if it's someone who I'm really comfortable with, things just flow. So scripting can help with helping you feel more confident in entering social situations. Sorry, I'm forgetting the question.
No, it's I am too, but that's an awesome response. I love scripting personally, especially in new settings or with new people.
Yeah.
Maybe leave the question up, Paul, just for a bit.
I've lost the question. I can't put the original question up, but I can summarize it though.
Comfortable with scripting, right? Like when we're talking. I think for me, I used to get quite anxious because I do get I'm hyperverbal, right? But I also can struggle to find certain words and mix up my phrases and put things out of order when I'm speaking. And I used to feel quite bad about that and think, people judged me for it, which I'm sure they did, whatever. But nowadays I just try to not care as much. And also, I mean, for me, it's about don't let that stop you. If it's to the point where you're so anxious, then get scripts and rely on scripts. There's nothing wrong with that. But if it's because you think you have to be this certain standard, don't. You don't. There's those rules are bullshit. Excuse my French. But you can literally just be you, and it doesn't matter if you don't speak so beautifully and perfectly and whatever. Just be you, and people who deserve your love and friendship, they won't care. They'll love you for that.
If I can just build on that, Annie, I think this idea of being you was a journey that I had to go on.
Oh yeah,
I could not
a long one.
And where I am now, just being able to kind of just talk and just go, I don't know what the question is. That has been so much work put into that. And I had to start with scripting. My very first Yellow Ladybugs conference, I wrote my entire, what I was going to say, word for word, and I just read that because it helped me do something that I really wanted. Only when I got more familiar was I able to go off script. So
I think not overnight.
Yeah, exactly. If you have to start with scripting, that is totally okay. Right. And you build the confidence to go, okay, you know what? Now maybe I'm on a stage and with safe people where I feel like I can be myself, or I trust myself to not script, and I'm okay if the words don't come out right. And it's about, at what point in the journey you are.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. We can't say scripts are either good or bad, because they can be really helpful, and they can also, at a different point in someone's journey, be really holding you back as well. Yeah. So I have scripts for when I can't find words. Right. I say things like, sorry, I'm not finding my words today. Right. I have tiny little snippets of things that I use with that. Sorry, Annie, I can hear you typing.
Oh, sorry. Is that distracting you? I was just responding to a comment about yellow ladybugs being about kids, and it's their focus is on youth, but it's anyone, like any age. Sorry, Paul.
I do things like that as well. Like if I do get distracted, and this is something that Sandhya was saying, like I'm just getting better at letting people know what's going on for me without internalizing the pressure, going, oh no, something.
I shouldn't let that distract me. Like that doesn't matter. I
need to let Annie interrupt right now, and then I need to continue completely flawlessly. And whereas I can be like, oops, I got interrupted. Oh, another script I really love. Sorry, sometimes when I get interrupted, I lose my train of thought. Great.
That's such a good script. Yeah. Mine's I interrupt a lot. Please keep going. I'm so sorry.
Another really good example.
Yeah.
So let me just give a quick recap of some things just for anyone who's just joining us new. Firstly, we are joined today by Annie and Sandhya, who have been speakers at this Autism from the Inside online summit, which is on right now. We're up to day 5. We've had an apology from Pete, unfortunately, and Jeremy as well today, which is a little bit disappointing. I know some of you were really we're really looking forward to seeing them on this live today. You can watch Pete's presentation at the summit like right now on working with autistic special interests. So that's really fun. And this whole weekend we're calling it an Encore replay weekend. So we've had 5 speakers every day for this whole week. And now all day Saturday and Sunday, you can watch all of those sessions again and share it with anyone. So if you found a session and you thought, wow, this is really good. Oh, but the time limit's out. The live thing is over it. Like, how do I share it? Well, you can share it this weekend. And if you're in the US or similar time zones, it finishes on Saturday afternoon. It finishes on Sunday afternoon, not like midnight, because of how the time differences work. So make sure you have a look at that. We also have super chats enabled, which is fantastic. We've had quite a few messages from James and Kate and Mike. So thanks for everyone who used that. It's literally the first live where we've ever had that on. So that's really exciting. And now let's have a look at some more questions. Why don't we try this one? I haven't read the full question yet, but homeschooling, online schooling versus regular school. Ooh. Any recommendations for the best learning environment?
My kid's not at school yet.
Well, you get ADHD 10-year-old. I think it's worth saying that everyone's different. However, I'm hearing some really common study stuff from you two with ADHD, which is probably going to be really helpful.
Yep. Sorry, the minute it goes, I'm like, what's the question?
Let's put the question back. So we are demonstrating live some of the ADHD needs here.
Gosh, I'm writing it down. Okay, now I can see it in the comments. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So I think, in terms of a blanket recommendation, we can't make those kind of recommendations because every person is going to be different, right? So, for example, for me, an ADHD, I loved mainstream because I was happy doing my own thing. So the social norms didn't actually quite bother me. And I had so many people to talk to. I just didn't make like those big, strong connections. Whereas, for some people I support, like who are quite socially driven, who experience bullying and rejection, it might not be the best environment for them. Right. And I'm not not saying that all mainstream has to be, social rejection and bullying, but it's about each person weighing up, where would I like to start? Right? Which environment do I feel is best for me? And actually making sure that you go through those options for yourself to go, what options are available to me? How practical is this for me? If I homeschool, what will that look like? And still, homeschooling's not like the easy option by any means. There are still kind of supports that we put in place. There are resources that we need to access. And there's, that time commitment that you're giving to yourself too. So it's about balancing what works for your child and really examining, can the school system support me? What accommodations are available at school? How willing is the school to work with me to provide these supports for my child? Those are some of the questions that I would ask.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that, Annie, or we can take a new?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I'm actually really anxious about my son going to school because I know this is going to be something that we have to go through. But I did 8 schools as an army brat, and I tried public, private, Catholic times 3. And none, I would not recommend either over the other. I've had good public schools and good private schools and bad public schools and bad private schools and so on. But I think a lot of it really depends on the principal and the culture at the school and their values and how willing they are to work with you. I have a lot of clients that have kids in school that are going through trying to get supports for them, and I help them with advocacy. And half of them probably end up homeschooling because it's just too hard, and the schools are just not, they're not resourced enough, and all of those things. There's lots of reasons, but some of them stick with it, and the others, I actually have quite a few clients that end up doing partial homeschooling. And I love the idea of that because I was a school refuser or school can't. And I skipped probably, I'd say easily 30% of my schooling. I just stayed homesick, or I remember most of year 8 and year 9, I'd go in at morning tea and miss the first 2 periods pretty much every day of those 2 years. It was great. I don't know how I got away with it, but I would have definitely been a child that really loved that hybrid schooling where I could go in maybe a few half days a week or a couple full days a week and then do homeschooling a couple days to deal with because I was also probably more like you, rather than trying to be like at home. I think homeschooling, I would have been bored, and not had the motivation to study. But at the same time, I know for others, it's the total opposite, where they can't focus in school, or there's so many reasons why mainstream schooling, no matter how supported, might not be ideal. So yeah, for me, it's really, I wish, similarly, how do we talk about, neurodiversity at work and neuroaffirming therapy? We need neuroaffirming education that is flexible and allows us all to, create our own education journey that suits our needs. That would be great, because I am never going to be homeschooling my child. I'm like, I can't do that. I can barely function already. But if I have to do half homeschooling, I will.
We can't be expecting parents to have the capacity to homeschool either. I mean, that's the whole point of having an institution like that. It's like, why do we have bakers to bake bread? Well, because it's hard to do every day yourself. So we have people trained specifically in it so that we can sort of outsource that a little bit. And how fantastic would it be if we could get schools right? We would have such a better chance of getting workplaces right as well. Because if you're like growing up and realizing what you need and what kind of flexibility you need and what you need to be able to study and concentrate and participate, then we can take that into the rest of the world as well. So
yeah,
it's a work in progress, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an interesting question. Can we have our own Discord server community soon? It would be so helpful and wonderful to connect with other people. So I'll respond to this very, very briefly. We have an online social group attached to the Autism from the Inside Facebook page. I think we already have a Discord server. What we don't have is a volunteer, wink, wink, anyone wanting to volunteer, to actually manage that in a competent way. So these kind of things are really fantastic once they get going, but there's a bit of work to actually set them up. So if you're really interested in that, get in touch somehow, either through the online social group or send an email through to autismfromtheinside.com.au. And I'd love to set that up. I personally don't have that skill set to do, but if you do, get in touch. Okay, here's an interesting question. Is it a thing that creativity is different for us? Like there are so many ways that I'm creative, but others where I just fail. Have you found out how to harness your creativity that works for you?
I would love to know what their definition of failing is, because I just think with creativity, like, is failing really a thing? You know, like,
I mean, I know I've definitely had experiences where I try to be creative in a certain way, and it just feels like work, and I don't like it.
Oh, that's true.
Just whether you call that a fail or not, you know, like it's clearly not for me, or clearly the way I'm doing it is not for me. And if I stuck at it, I would do it in a way that was draining and not really creative or life-giving in that sense. So yeah, I find it's really personal, like the exact way that you do it. And sometimes taking away a tiny little barrier can make a big difference.
So true.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like creativity has many mediums, and there are certain mediums that, you know, might not be your particular medium or outlet. And for example, like drawing, I know that my brain does not come up easily with visual ideas for some reason. It comes up with words. So yeah, my mind is blanking at this point. You know, and trying to pursue art. Art is an area that I've historically failed at because it was a subject taught at school. And it was graded according to someone else's expression and someone else's standard of what good art should look like. Whereas, you know, as I got older, I started to experiment with being creative just because it made me feel good. So not measuring whether it was good or not. Did it make me feel good? Was it something that was life-giving for me? And using that to pursue. So, like, you know, this wall's a great example. I literally just put a bunch of shapes on it. It's not well painted, but it's something that made me really happy. And, you know, I did pottery, and I love the feel of pottery now. And I don't judge it. I think it's important for us not to judge our creations, but, you know, because that's really the thief of joy when we go, well, that one's better.
Yeah.
Right? We focus on creating for the purpose of it makes me happy to do this. I don't think we can fail.
So true. I love that. That's like perfect advice. I just think, and also like questioning what we think traditionally is creativity. Like my mom is such a creative person, and I grew up saying I'm not creative because she was so creative, like could so paint everything. But I used to choreograph my own ice skating routines. And for me, that was my expression of creativity, right? And nowadays I'd call a lot of the creativity I do is in writing. which is obviously probably a more traditional form of creativity, but not what we think of when we're thinking, oh, you know, artistry and stuff. And I think, yeah, ditching the judgment and just do what makes you feel good. Like, autistic joy is beautiful and we should all have more of it.
So an example of a non-traditional form of creativity, I like spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets are the best.
Love it.
So it can be actually quite relaxing for me.
Therapy, man. Love it.
Like, I wrote an Excel spreadsheet to solve the daily Wordle for me, right? Just because I'm like,
So
that'll be fun. I'm on holiday. I've got a couple of weeks off. What am I going to do? It's not great. It's not efficient, but it's interesting. You know, it was something that I felt like I could do.
Totally.
But with the judging thing, there's kind of two ways of being creative, though. Like, something is just I'm being expressive, which is great, and we don't need to judge it. And then there's I'm being creative and trying to do something really specific. And I find I actually like one of my core values is continual improvement. So I will write an essay or something, or I'll try and get my ideas on paper, and then I'll try and get it better and better and better and better. And actually, that, for me personally, that process of continual improvement is the creativity that I enjoy doing. So
Awesome.
was it our session, Annie, that we were saying how easy it is to beat ourselves up for beating ourselves up?
Oh yeah, I'm the best at that. I think it's a superpower of mine.
Yeah. So sometimes this whole we shouldn't judge things comes back to bite us in the back of the head. It's like, oh no, I'm judging things. Bad me.
Especially, I think when I mean, in early days, I've been in therapy for a decade now, but like in the early days of therapy, when you're starting to become quite aware of maybe how your brain works and what your inner voice is like, more so than you were, it can be really easy to pick those things up. And I think it's a very CBT thing to like, oh, my brain's thinking this, and if I change that thought, it'll make me feel different. But I'm autistic. I can't change that thought. And actually what helps me is being okay with that thought and not judging myself for it. Hello, compassion and acceptance. Yeah. Anyway.
So I kind of feel like we had a fantastic high energy and we're lowering a little bit. Annie already shared with us in the very beginning, for anyone who didn't join, we were talking about spoons and how we don't always have very much. I really loved your comment about your tech. Being so
my camera knows it's a low spoon day. It's harassing me.
Making me look at myself. Yeah.
It never does this, so it's really interesting, like that it's sort of recognizing that. Obviously it's not, but like I'm just pretending. It's totally reads me.
Anthropomorphizing, I think, is the word.
Exactly.
My take.
I think objects have feelings.
So thanks for everyone for watching. Thanks so much for everyone who tried out the super chat function. So that's exciting. Thanks to Annie and Sandhya for a really interesting, energetic discussion today.
And Moose. Come here, Moose.
Say bye. Moose.
Up. Say hello.
Oh, lovely.
Hey. He's like, get in the camera.
It's very hard to compete with that.
Feedback. All right, off.
And thanks for having us, Paul. And
yeah, thank you for having us.
Joined us. I've been reading your comments throughout, so that's been really nice.
Yeah, great.
Thank
summit,
you for everyone who's put the comments on the summit videos and things. They've all been really nice as well. We're day 5 now. Encore Weekend starts 9 a.m. tomorrow morning Australia time, which is Friday afternoon in the US, just to give you a sense of time zones. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. I'm going to listen to my camera and go chill. Bye, guys. Lovely to see you both.
thanks for everything. Actually, we can do a really fun thing. That's okay.
Oh, no.
That's okay. That is completely fine because I can do this.
You can't see me, but I'm waving. Oh, you can hear me. Yay.
Yay.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Annie.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Great chat. I've been loving reading it, and trying to focus on a million things.
Bye.
Thanks, Paul. See ya.